Well, like I promised, I said that we were going to do a little bit of transmission work on the shop truck, put a shift kit in there and a high stall converter, Saturday night special. These items have come in, and let me show you what I got. Okay, I've got a deep steel pan. I just couldn't justify the expense of an aluminum pan. $200 versus $50 for this one. I did get a filter extension kit to go with it, and I got the TF2 shift improver kit from TransGo. I've used the TF1 in the past, and truthfully it made things a little bit better. However, if you're going to go through the trouble of putting a shift kit in, you might as well go with race shifts. You can always let up off the gas before it shifts if it's shifting too hard for you. But yeah, I mean, the TF1 was okay, but it didn't provide the performance that I was looking for, even with towing. So the TF2, hopefully that'll be a step up. Also got a trans temperature gauge, and this gauge here will allow me to monitor the fluid temperature. I bypass all of my automatic transmission systems that go through the engine radiator. I think that's a bad idea. I mean, hydraulics like to run 150, 160, 180 degrees, and an engine wants to run at close to 200, and a transmission will start to fail over 220. So why introduce all that heat? So I always bypass mine, and I've got an auxiliary cooler on mine, on actually all my older vehicles and even the newer ones, and it's much superior, much better, easily controlled temperatures, etc. Now, I don't live up north where it's frigid and I have to worry about the transmission fluid being too cold, so that might be something that you would want to consider. And you know, you could basically run an auxiliary cooler after the transmission cooler, or not the transmission cooler but the engine cooler. But yeah, whatever you need to do in order in the area that you're from. So I got that. I got some other goodies, and I got some braided transmission cooler line hosing. So I've got a torque converter, but it's on back order. So we'll put all this junk together. I'm also going to install the trans temperature sensor in the pan. And so let me get this thing on the lift, start tearing it apart, and we'll show you step by step as things go. Hang in it. All right, well, we got the valve body out, and let me go over some of the things that you'll run into, some of the things that you'll see when you're doing a shift kit. For example, we've got the separator plate, the hydraulic valve body, the shift body here, and I've got everything washed down. The balls have been removed. One good thing about the 727 is it comes with 3 different types of fasteners, and like for example this quarter 20, all the quarter 20 hex heads are the same length. All the flat tip screwdriver ends, all those fasteners are the same length. And then you have a short Phillips head fastener. Those are all the same length, so you can't screw them up, is the good thing. So basically you don't have to worry so much about putting a long fastener in a short spot. And another thing that I'm taking advantage of is I've got several old transmissions, so if I have a question on how to pull it apart or what I need to do, I can do it on the old transmission instead of tearing up the running transmission that's in the shop truck. So I am going to get started on this. There is quite a bit to it. There's more to the TF2 kit than there is the TF1, and I'm sure it's going to be worth it. But it's got quite a bit of stuff going on, quite a bit of information that you got to go through. The instructions aren't that good, so at least, or maybe it's just me, I've got to take and read them 3 or 4 times to figure out what they're trying to say. But once you get it ciphered out, it starts to make sense, and so that's where I'm going to be working from. And like I said, I've got this temperature sending unit. You can see that with the hole saw I screwed it up and it's offset to the left, so I'm going to have to clean that up and move it over. I also spent a little time taking a 5/16 flanged nut, and I drilled it and tapped it to go into the 1/8 NPT for the temperature sending unit for the sensor that's going to go into the pan. So I'm going to tack weld this nut to the inside of the pan. That way I don't have to worry about it coming loose and then having to take the pan down to tighten it up. So I'm going to tack weld that into the pan. I just got to find out what's the best location in the pan to do that. It's probably going to be on the passenger side, and I'll follow up with you guys on that. But I'll take and sand this down, clean it, get it nice and clean so I can tack weld it into the deep pan there. All right, hang in there, guys. I'm working on this thing, stumbling through it myself. This is only my second ship kit, and this is going to be a full race ship kit, and I'll let you know, I'll report back on how it compares to the TF1. Alright, let's take a quick look here. This is basically all the spools and springs pulled out of the valve body, with the exception of this one here. It's quite a lot to it. There's a lot going on here. And if you look at the divider plate here, I went through and I marked the areas in the instructions. Check for a hole there, enlarge that hole, and basically you go through the steps. Make sure you enlarge that hole. Make sure you read everything several times, because sometimes it's kind of vague. And like in the instructions on one, it'll say if you don't have this hole R, then don't do the step on page 5. However, if you're not paying attention, you end up getting frustrated looking at page 5, and then you remember and you go, oh yeah, I don't have to do that step. So basically on page 1, go to page 5 and mark that so that you don't spend more time looking at it. And this is basically everything we got here. I'm going to go ahead and start putting it back together. It's got some larger springs put into certain places, and some modifications that you have to do, but it's not that hard, it's not that difficult. It's just trying to keep do everything that you're supposed to do, and only do it to the part that they tell you to do it to, so you don't ruin something. Alright, one of the options here, if you look at the options and improvements for the ship kit, one of the last ones to reduce or prevent the piston binding, the low range reverse piston from binding. is you've got to take and turn down the outside lip or the shoulder of that piston. So let me show you what I gotta do. I don't have a lathe, that would be ideal. So basically I just chucked up this the piston, and I am going to spin it and use a file to clean that up, and then I'll go to some sandpaper and make sure that it's deburred and ready to go. So watch me do that. Okay, so it calls for about 3:30 seconds. We're already there. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit and clean it up, and then use some sandpaper on it to deburr. Go to a little bit less aggressive for the final. And we'll be done. So. So we took that down a little bit and tapered that shoulder. Tapered that shoulder a little bit to take any burrs off of it. Looks real good. I guess there's the potential for it to cock inside the cylinder, and so this kind of helps minimize that opportunity. So we've got that. And then I also have to put on the heavy duty piston spring, I need to put a spacer on there so that there's less travel. And then a heavier spring will go on for the return. Alright, now I've got the low range slash reverse piston back in. Now we have to put the band lever back in place. Now, unfortunately, the only way to get this lever out in order to work on the piston is you got to take the tail housing off of the transmission, because the pin is stopped from coming out by the tail housing. So you pull all that out in order to get this lever off so you can pull the piston, and then when you put it all back together, what I like to do is I like to use some heavy axle grease to hold that pin, or actually it's like a square band or a square piece of flat bar that activates the band from the lever. And you can't really see it, but it's back there, and it's just got a double slot, a slot in the band and a slot in the lever. And instructions tell you to tighten it up with a short wrench and then back it off 2.5 turns. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so making progress. I put these transmission cooler lines together, and it's pretty nice heavy duty lines at an affordable price I got on Amazon. These they have a nylon braiding on the outside, and I added even more braiding along the body of them, and I used adhesive and shrink wrap at the end so that the braiding wouldn't come apart. So I'm going to put those on the cooler lines for the transmission. And if you look over here, I've got the fittings. I redid the fittings here and down there. It's a 90-degree fitting. They're going to go back, or I should say forward, on the driver's side of the frame, and we were going to bring them over to an auxiliary cooler, which is right here. And on my trucks, I found that it doesn't make any sense when you're working something hard off-road to introduce 190, 200 degree engine temperature into your transmission fluid. So I always bypass the radiator and go right into an auxiliary cooler. And I found that normally a transmission running on the road will run at around 160, 170 degrees. And then working it hard off-road, I've never seen them go over 190, 200. So that's a lot lower than the average of 200, and then when you work it real hard it goes up to 220, 230, etc. So that's what I'm in the process of doing now. And also, just as I predicted, once I got the transmission installed and almost ready to hook up and run, my back-ordered torque converter came in, or not came in, but has been shipped. So it should be here in the next 5 days. So I am not going to finish this. I'm going to wait for the torque converter to show up, pull the transmission out, and put that 2000 stall torque converter in. So hang in there. I'm going to try to keep this updated and hopefully get a video together here shortly. Thanks. Alright, so this is what we've been waiting on. This is the TCI Saturday Night Special. It provides a stall speed of between 1800 and 2000 depending on the engine size, power that you have. So I've been waiting for this for a little over a month. It was starting to look like it would stay back ordered for at least 2 months, but lo and behold, they pulled one out of their hat here and had it sent to me in like 2 days. So from the time that they said that they filled the order until it got to the house, it was only 2 days. So that's good news. But that's the part number there. And they get a TCI checklist. Yeah, I've worked in factories before. I don't believe any of that stuff. But basically, this is the unit here. It's similar, very similar to a Dodge unit, except the Dodge has the starter ring welded to it. We don't. We have a flywheel on our AMCs. So AMC calls this, instead of a torque flight like Dodge does, they call it a torque command. So I'm happy that it's here. We're going to take this and put it into that beast over there. And as stated before, I'm just about finished the installation of the transmission because I didn't want to wait on this thing. Now I'm going to pull it all apart, put it back together. All right. Okay, let's talk about COVID. How is it that we have this horrible virus that potentially is killing two out of 1,000 young people and potentially 5 out of 1,000 elderly people, and that we've got to shut down the economy in order to prevent the spread? Well, if that's the case, then why is it that protesters are allowed to go out and protest? They're able to protest, and all of a sudden it's not a big deal. Don't really need to worry about the virus spreading. I think that's crazy. I mean, what kind of politics is involved with that? Also, so why is it that that protesters being able to go out and protesting is a right and a privilege that's afforded to Americans? Protests and rallies, that's very acceptable. However, when it becomes violence and it becomes burning down buildings and taking over towns and streets and corners, that's a whole different story. Now you're infringing on other people's rights and privileges, basically taking them away. And how is that more important than people's businesses? People spent their lives building these businesses, and now they're losing them because the government's shutting them down because they don't want to spread COVID. However, the protests are more important than these people's lives and well-being, the ones that have these businesses. That's not acceptable. I mean, doesn't anybody other than me consider these things? I mean, this is our culture and our society. Our media has gone crazy. Also, Freddie Gray, what happened to him was a horrible, terrible thing. Those policemen that did that, they should go to jail. They should suffer the consequences. Policemen are not above the law. They are supposed to be our protectors. And what happened to Freddie Gray should never happen to anyone. And people rallying, protesting against police violence, I think that's appropriate. That's a good thing to do. However, it's no more important, or probably, in my opinion, less important than the welfare of all these people's businesses that are being shut down because of the COVID scare. Freddie Gray, he's a martyr now. He is not somebody that I would want my kids to grow up and emulate. He is not a good example. He's not somebody that I would emulate as a good example. The guy had a horrible, horrible criminal record. Some of the things that he'd done are just atrocious. But now he's a martyr because of the police brutality. It's somebody to rally around. The problem is not systemic racism. It's not white privilege. The problem with the black culture is that it's a failing culture. It's a culture where they don't have two-parent families. Two-parent families are what it takes to raise strong children. And if children are born into a household with one parent or no parent, they're going to be raised by the environment and the people around them. There won't be people there telling them what's right and wrong, what's acceptable. There won't be people there telling them or learning them about other people's welfare and to love thy neighbor, etc. So what we should be doing is not throwing money at it, not making promises that won't come true, because in order to fix a problem you have to go to the root cause, and the root cause is the family. We should be making it the preferred family, a family with two parents. Okay? That's what we need to do. We need to incentivize. We need to if we're going to give incentives, we need to give incentives to keep a family together. If a family needs help to stay together, that's what we should be doing. But instead, we take an unwed mother, a young girl, she gets pregnant, she goes on the system, she gets a house, she gets food, she gets daycare, she gets health care, and she gets free tuition to go to school. All because she made some poor decisions. However, a young person that finishes high school, wants to go to college, can't get any of that help. Sure, they can get student loans, but they can't get the grants. They don't have access to the funds that those other people have because they made poor choices. So how is that fair? It's not fair. It's not fair at all.